Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at something pretty remarkable.
We are.
It's an address from Reverend Sun Myung given back in 1977. And this was not your typical anniversary speech.
No, not at all. It was more like a spiritual accounting. Really intense. He goes deep into the chaos and the challenges around his wedding to Hak Jahan in 1960.
And the years that followed, this period of just immense testing.
That's right. He actually gave it a name. He called it the Cross of Love. And in this speech, he laid out the brutal spiritual requirements he placed on his wife and his mother-in-law.
Not out of malice, but for the mission.
It was a mission. That was everything. And you have to remember, Moon had been working completely alone for over 15 years before this.
Yeah.
Single-minded.
So the anticipation for this moment, for the selection of the Heavenly Bride, must have been huge.
Off the charts. Which brings us to the mission for this deep dive. First, we need to get our heads around the sheer scale of the shockwave that his choice created. And second, we'll trace the ordeal itself, the test of faith. And from that, understand the universal principle that he pulled from it.
A test that started with the family itself.
Immediately.
So let's start there with that expectation. Because the sources show this wasn't just, wishful thinking. People had reasons to believe they were the logical choice.
That's the critical piece of context. God had apparently revealed to many different women that they were candidates.
Really?
To multiple people.
Yes, or that they were in a role that was preparing them for it. It's based on this principle that spiritually, everyone takes the bride's role to the Messiah.
So it created this widespread and, in their minds, legitimate anticipation.
Absolutely. The whole community was waiting.
And then the actual choice. It defied all of it.
Completely. He chose mother, Hak Jahan. She was in Shinshan and Frohan. I mean, to the core members in Seoul, she was basically unknown.
Not a public figure at all. Not at that time. So you can imagine the shockwave, the disappointment. And it really hit three specific groups the hardest.
Okay, let's break those down. Who felt the most overlooked?
Well, first you had the families of the Revelations.
The ones you just mentioned.
Exactly. These were families who firmly believed, based on very specific revelations they'd received, that the bride would come from their house. For them, this was a deeply personal shock.
A promised destiny that just vanished.
Okay, who was the second group?
The second group, you could call them the spiritual authorities.
The old guard.
Yes, the spiritual old ladies, the prophetesses. They had served in these key roles for years. Moon had relied on them.
So they felt they had some authority in this decision.
They felt they had the pride and authority to at least be consulted or to approve the choice. And Moon chose her suddenly, with zero consultation. He just bypassed that entire spiritual hierarchy.
That would have felt like a massive betrayal. And the third group?
The third group were the worldly qualified women.
Meaning
The young women who, on paper, were perfect. Beautiful, university degrees, good families.
all of it. They just operated on the logical assumption that the leader of a global movement would pick someone with social standing with education. Someone
Someone like them.
like them.
And then there was just the simple logic of age, right? That didn't add up either.
That was the final blow for many. Moon was 40 in 1960.
So logically, you'd expect a bride who was, in her 30s? Mature enough to be a leader?
Exactly. People thought the position required this tremendous maturity and experience. And how could a teenager possibly have that?
Mother's age just flew in the face of that very logical conclusion.
It added to all the confusion and the disenchantment.
And the sources really stress this point.
Yeah.
Because the hopes were so high, the sense of betrayal was just as deep.
It was an equal and opposite reaction.
And Moon said in 77 that he had never, ever spoken about this tension publicly before.
It was too raw. That disappointment created this deep spiritual divide, a real Cain and Abel situation where the whole community felt like Cain cast out.
And to fix that, the conditions right after the wedding had to be severe.
Incredibly severe. It was a test designed to start at the absolute lowest point.
And it began not with the couple, but with mother's mother, Grandmother Hong.
Instantly. Immediately after the ceremony, Moon asked her to confine herself.
What does that mean, confine herself?
He told her not to visit her daughter often, and if she did, she had to come secretly through the back door.
Wow.
She was forbidden from acting publicly like the mother of the heavenly bride.
That seems unbelievably harsh. Your daughter achieves this incredible position, and your reward is to be hidden. Why?
It was spiritual calibration. It was meant to silence any expectation of glory, this idea of becoming the mother of an empress.
It put her in a position nobody would envy.
Exactly. A cast-out position. It was a form of indemnity, a spiritual price that had to be paid so they could embrace all the others who felt cast out and miserable.
And Mother herself, the bride,
Yeah.
she wasn't spared either.
Far from it. Moon says that for the first whole year, he treated her almost like a servant instead of my wife.
No honeymoon.
He described it as an ordeal on Mother's part. She had to show absolute fidelity, absolute humility from the lowest possible starting point.
So it wasn't punishment. It was a spiritual strategy. Put them at a 0 point, no ego, no glory, so they could reconcile with everyone who felt wronged.
That's it, exactly. The goal was for neither of them to complain or rebel. They had to just accept it. And that silent, faithful perseverance was the only way to spiritually embrace the community that felt so betrayed.
And this ordeal wasn't just for a year. It expanded into a 7-year period.
Right, what he called Mother's 7-year fishing expedition.
Can you break that down for us? What was the purpose of those 7 years?
It was very structured. The first 3 years were for her own individual victory.
Just for her.
Just for her. She had to struggle as a woman to win over Satan in God's sight. It was about personal, internal mastery.
3 years focused inward. What about the other 4?
The next 4 years, the scope widened. It became about the whole family. Moon, Mother, their young children. They went through what he called an incredible testing period together.
So restoring the public and family position.
Yes. If phase 1 was the internal foundation, phase 2 was securing the external environment against all the accusations.
And those accusations were intense, right?
Yeah.
Fueled by all those disappointed groups.
They were relentless. Just heartbreaking rumors. People were saying that Mother was a failure, that Moon was already looking for a new bride.
That's awful.
And there's this painful detail in the source. When people found out their birthdays were on the same day, the accusation was that she was just creating a false birthday to make it seem like destiny.
Just constant undermining.
A sustained attack to try and destroy her position.
In that kind of environment, it's only human to want some comfort, some explanation from your husband. But he gave her nothing.
And that is the absolute core of the cross of love. It's so counterintuitive. Moon stated he never comforted her, never explained. He never said, hang in there, I'm doing this on purpose.
But why? Why the silence?
Because if he had explained it, if he'd comforted her, any victory she won would not have been valuable.
It would have been his victory, not hers.
It would have been a dependent victory. She had to win it on her own faith, her own understanding, her own perseverance. That independent, silent endurance is what gives her position its authority.
Wow. A fierce battle to restore love all alone. And that's what he calls the cross of love.
The most extraordinary cross of all. It wasn't just suffering. It was the spiritual battle to pay the indemnity for love and restore its center back to God.
And eventually, her perseverance started to change things.
It had to. Because she was patient, she was silent, she kept her faith.
Yeah.
The whole environment of accusation eventually it yielded.
It flipped.
A total reversal. The gossip and contempt turned into respect and admiration. The community came to the conclusion she really deserves to be the mother of the universe. Her victory proved the choice was right all along.
And only then, once that victory was secure, was the situation with her mother, Grandmother Hong, finally fixed.
Right. And the source is very meticulous here. After that universal victory was demonstrated, Moon publicly reversed her situation and gave Grandmother Han her full glory.
He brought her out of the shadows.
He said she must receive the respect, admiration, and glory that are due her in her own lifetime. And he said this was required by the principle, by the doctrine.
Why was that so important?
So that her suffering wouldn't negatively affect the next generation, her grandchildren. The spiritual price had been paid, and the books, they had to be publicly balanced.
This entire 7-year path, starting with that shockwave, it all points to a core principle. What's the big lesson Moon pulled from this?
The central lesson is a complete reversal of how the world thinks. It's this. The blessing of a glorious heavenly throne is not given from the highest, most glorious position.
So if it's not given from the top, where do you find it?
You find it at the bottom. The blessing must be won at the lowest level of human misery. He says it so clearly. Blessings never come in high places. They come to you in the lowest places.
A principle he said he started in a dungeon, that he applied to Mother, and that he applies to everyone.
It's the requirement for endurance. If Mother had complained during those 7 years, she would have lost her position. And that's the message for you, for the listener. If you're put in a tough spot and you start to complain.
You risk losing your position entirely.
Right.
So the decisive factor isn't your external situation, but your internal attitude.
Precisely. He says when you become self-centered and begin to complain, then you begin to lose. Success, prosperity. It all depends on whether your heart is set right. Selflessness, he says, is the key.
What an incredible story. From this massive collective expectation to the shocking choice of an unknown teenager, and then this silent, solitary ordeal called the cross of love.
The entire foundation was built not on glory, but on resilience from the lowest possible point.
And it was that silent endurance that really defined it.
Absolutely. Moon's refusal to explain or comfort her was the very thing that guaranteed her victory would be eternal and absolute. It was the hardest path, but because she won it herself, it's the most enduring.
So, if the highest spiritual glory has to be won through personal suffering at the absolute lowest level of human misery, with no comfort, no explanation, what does that tell us about the connection between our own self-knowledge, our sacrifices, and the real value of any blessing we win? What's the actual difference between enduring something because you know the reason why and enduring it in total silence, waiting to figure it out for yourself?
That's the question.
Mull on that until our next deep dive.